I thank the chair. And my understanding is that the speaker is traveling to Europe later this week for the specific purposes of examining the covered bond market, is my understanding. To the last point, Mr. Ely, can you just inform me, though, what is the backstop, if you will, in the European model?
I'm sorry. I didn't
what is the backstop, if you will, in the European model? You suggested a reserve instead of the Federal Financing Bank here.
There have been, as I understand it, and there may be others on the panel that can speak to this more specifically, that there have been some situations where there's been some ad hoc mechanisms created to deal with short-term cash flow and market problems.
Does anybody else want to chime in on that? Yeah, sure.
The assumption was that in the event that the covered bond matured and the cash flows from the assets were insufficient, that the assumption was that the assets would be able to be sold, or that the covered bond issuer would be able to raise other liabilities. Last year, what happened was the sovereign governments of Ireland, United Kingdom, Netherlands, Belgium, and Germany had to rescue the financial institutions. That was the backstop.
Mm-hmm. But prior to that, there was not.
No.
Right. And so because over there was no statutory framework for it, right? That was specifically touched upon that point, as you say, that, quote, the assumption was, or I guess you would say priced into the model of it then, that's how they would assume that they would be covered. So that was in the pricing mechanism. So, and I'll have to delve into this a little bit deeper, but I guess you could also put that in, if the statutory framework here was just the contrary here as far as not having the backstop, then I guess that would just be part of the pricing of the product as well, would it not?
Congressman Garrett, if I could speak to that.
Sure.
I agree completely. One concern that has existed trying to transplant the covered bond system in the United States is to make crystal clear here that there is neither an explicit or implicit guarantee from the government. I think what we found in Europe was silence in the legislative frameworks on what would happen when the issuer defaulted, a separate resolution process began for this cover pool, and it was silent at that point, and I think some in the market thought that that implied a guarantee from the government. And so by providing liquidity only, no credit risk, so the same kind of borrowing that banks can get from the discount window, the notion, at least in the council's view, is that this kind of clear borrowing only for liquidity, only until cash comes in from the assets themselves, is critical.
Okay. Oh, yeah, we've had that problem here, of course, in other areas where there was an implicit guarantee that some people thought was an explicit guarantee, then it turned out to be an explicit guarantee.
And Mr. Garrett, if I could just add to that.
Sure.
My proposal, or as I talked about it in my statement, is again, just following up on Mr. Stengel's comments, that it is strictly a liquidity support comparable to banks borrowing from the discount window with no loss intended for the taxpayer.
Okay. Can we just comments? I'll run down the line, or anybody wants to make. In our proposal, there is language there with regard to a wider array of asset classes, one of being commercial properties, and you addressed that issue. Mm-hmm. European model does not have that. Did you just want to comment on if there's a reason why you saw that that's not in that model, and why that's a benefit to our model? I think you touched about the benefit here, but why?
There are commercial mortgages in the European model. In fact, I think one of the reasons.
Well, I mean, I'm sorry, I should take that back. It's not in the U.S. model that has begun over here, I should have said. Yeah.
Right. Well, it hasn't been, and thank you. You've been very supportive in trying to add commercial real estate to the legislation,
right.
So we're thankful for that. We see no reason not to include it. It's been a viable asset class in Europe. In fact, it's been probably the prevalent source of commercial mortgage financing from banks in Europe.
Okay. And from anyone on the panel, what is the time frame, assuming that we have a hearing today and the markup soon, and this legislation moves expeditiously through the House and the Senate, how quickly can this market actually blossom and grow into something of a sizable nature? And I've heard all sorts of, not just time frames, but the size of the market, but how quickly can this really grow here in the U.S.?
Well,
Congressman, excuse me.
I think if the market needs to move, start quickly, and we need to enact this quickly in order for it to have the best benefit, because right now, the traditional securitization markets are somewhat impeded, and covered bonds we're not thinking are going to be a replacement for securitization, but an additional tool for banks. So to the extent we can get the legislation out quickly, I think banks will take very good advantage of it in the near term. As securitization markets recover and we have some basis for new issuance, I think covered bonds will be another tool, but may not be the predominant tool.
Gentleman from North Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Since